Hey guys, welcome back to another GRE video brought to you by TrboTest. Today we will be talking about 10 tips that you can use to increase your GRE quant score today. So let's dive right in. So the first tip I have for you guys is to use smart numbers if possible. If you have been studying for the GRE for any period of time, you have likely come across the term smart numbers. Smart numbers are real numbers that you choose to make during necessary calculations as simple as possible in a given problem. So let me give you an example of this to make it a little bit more clear. Let's say you need to determine what percent the final price of an item was of the original price. If the original price was first increased by 20% and then decreased by 40%, to easily get through this question, we'll use the smart number of 100 for the original price. Then we will calculate as follows. The increase of 20% yields 100 times 0.12, which is 120. The decrease of 40% yields 120 times 0.6, which is 72. Thus, the new price is 72% of the original. So just by using that smart number, we came up with the new correct answer just by creating a number basically out of thin air that was not given to us in the original question. Tip number 2, make the calculator your friend, not your enemy. This is very, very important. Don't delay getting familiar with the GRE calculator. The GRE calculator is an on-screen tool provided during your exam. You may not bring or use your own calculator. So when do you use this on-screen calculator? When used properly, the GRE calculator can significantly benefit you. However, ETS, the folks who created the GRE, know you have access to this calculator. So they try their best to get you to use it, more specifically when you don't even need to use it, and that'll just waste time down the road. Let's briefly look at some situations in which it makes sense to use the calculator and when it does not make sense to use the calculator. So you should use the calculator when you have complex numbers with a lot of decimals where you can't really solve them relatively easily. You can look at this example right here, 1.0021 divided by 0.21, or if you're multiplying a very large number like 563 times 10,111. If you are raising numbers to a very high power, such as 2 to the ninth, or if you're multiplying a large number to the third or fourth power, that can be something complicated where you'd like to use a calculator. Square roots of numbers that are not perfect squares is another example of when a calculator would be best to be used. You should not use a calculator for basic math, such as 8 times 12 or 6 plus 4 plus 3. Even simple fractions that you can do in your head, it's best to do them in your head as that'll be quicker than actually using the on-screen calculator. You should also be familiar with most of the common square roots, such as the square root of 81 and the square root of 144. Knowing these will save you time on the exam and will make sure you don't need to waste time using the calculator. I have here an example of what the on-screen calculator will look like, so you see it well ahead of your exam. If you don't know what some of these numbers mean, I would highly suggest you do some Google searching so you are familiar with the calculator on the day of the exam. Moving on to the third tip, memorize QC answer choices and understand what they mean. The GRE Quant section contains 4 major question types, and one of the more challenging types is the quantitative comparison questions. We'll refer to them as QC moving forward. QC questions present 2 quantities, quantity A and quantity B. You must determine whether there is a consistent relationship between the two. One great thing about the quantitative comparison questions is that the answer choices are always the same. So you'll want to memorize these because every second counts. As you can see, letter A rather, quantity A is greater than quantity B. Quantity B is greater than quantity A. C is that they are both equal, and D is that this relationship between the two quantities cannot be determined. Keep in mind that these answer choices will not change for this type of questions. So, consider all the information in the QC questions. You may notice that the QC questions that sometimes there is given information in the question stem. The given information is critical, especially when it contains qualifiers. Qualifiers include descriptions such as x is greater than 0, x is a positive integer, or y is an even number. The qualifier may whittle down your possible answer choices, but unfortunately, it is easy to skip over if you're not careful. Remember, though, missing any given information could be the difference between an incorrect answer and a correct answer. So let's take a look at an example. Let's say you had a QC question with the information but no qualifiers. The question stem is given as x squared minus 2x minus 15 equals 0. Quantity A is x and quantity B is 2. Simplifying the question stem using FOIL, we will have x equals 5 and x equals negative 3. When x equals 5, quantity A is greater than quantity B, but when x equals negative 3, quantity A is less than quantity B. Since we have possible values for x greater than and less than 2, we have inconsistent relationships between the quantities. Therefore, the answer is D. Now let's take a look at an identical problem, but we're going to just make one small change in that we will mark x greater than 0 as the qualifier. Because we know x is greater than 0, we know that x equals negative 3 is not applicable. Since the qualifying information in the question stem tells us that x is greater than 0, x equals 5 is the only valid answer, and thus quantity A is greater than quantity B. Notice how the qualifier x greater than 0 changed the answer. Tip number 5. The phrase closest to is meaningful in GRE quant questions. As we have discussed previously, it is important to be mindful of all information provided in the GRE quant questions, regardless of how insignificant the information may seem. Case in point, the phrase closest to is an important phrase because it implies that we can rely on an estimation to come up with an answer. If we miss this information in a question, we may take the question too much farther than we need to come up with an answer. Sometimes, and this is not on this page right here, but sometimes when it says closest to, it gives you a hint that you can use round numbers that make it easier to come up with a solution and therefore reducing your need to use a calculator. So let's take a look at this example. Let's say we need to know which of the following answer choices is equal to 28 to the 18th power minus 7 to the 9th power. And we have A, B, C, D, and E. First, don't even think about trying to use a calculator on this, and don't try re-expressing the bases of 28 and 7 to primes, which, although correct mathematically, is not necessary. Return to the question stem and notice the phrase closest to, which is a big hint that very little math, if any, is needed to solve this problem. And certainly it means you do not need a calculator to solve this problem. To get the correct answer, we must recognize that because 28 to the 18th power is so much bigger than 7 to the 9th power, the approximate answer is still 28 to the 18th power. So by recognizing the words closest to, we can solve this question in seconds rather than minutes. Tip number 6, memorize essential quant formulas. As you know, the GRE is a timed exam, meaning that when you're attacking problems, every second counts. A great way to save time on the GRE quant is to memorize as many formulas, concepts, and procedures as possible. I can't stress enough how important memorization is as one of your main problem-solving solutions. For example, if you see an average rate of change question and you need to quickly use the formula average rate equals total distance divided by total time, or if you see a question involving the difference of squares, you need to be able to recall the formula x plus y, x minus y equals x squared minus y squared. These are just a couple examples, but you get the point. A great way to memorize all these formulas is a set of flashcards. Essentially, whenever you come across a formula you think you should know, just put it on a flashcard. That way, by test day, you won't need to waste any time trying to recall a needed formula. Let's practice through a few questions to illustrate the importance of memorization. Tip number 7, don't game which quant questions will show up. A question I am often asked is, what questions will be on the GRE exam? Honestly, I have no idea. An honest GRE professional will tell you that there is no way to know exactly what will show up. It does not matter if you have hyper-analyzed every official GRE practice test or even memorized what you've seen on previous GREs. The fact is, every exam is going to be unique and different, and no one can tell you with any certainty what will show up on a given exam. So rather than trying to game the system by predicting what you might see, get a rock solid understanding of all the GRE quant concepts so you won't be spinning the roulette wheel on test day. Remember, there are only 27 quant questions on the GRE, reduced from 40 before. You have only 27 opportunities to get questions right. So if you decide to skip a couple of the major topics during your prep, and then 10 questions out of the 27 appear to be about that topic on a given day, you'll be in a tough spot on that day. So make sure you review all of the quant topics. Tip number 8, treat VIC problems as you would any other quant problem. VIC problems are a specific type of GRE quant problem. The term VIC refers to problems that have variables in the answer choices. Now, while VIC problems look more foreboding than the garden variety normal GRE quant questions, the math involved in a VIC problem does not differ from the math used when we have actual numbers. In other words, you don't need to replace the variables with actual numbers. Doing so would slow you down and increase the potential for mistakes. So let's take a look at almost two identical problems so you can understand where I'm coming from. Example 1, a non-VIC question. Nitish and Gordon have 14 baseball cards. If Nitish has 4 more baseball cards than Gordon, how many baseball cards does Gordon have? We can let n be the number of cards Nitish has and g be the number of cards Gordon has. We can create two equations, n plus g equals 14 and n equals g plus 4. Substituting g plus 4 for n, we have that g plus 4 plus g equals 14, or g equals 5. So the correct answer is C. Now let's look at the problem we just did as a VIC problem, with the answer choices containing variables instead of numbers. Keep a close eye on how the process of solving does not change. Nitish and Goran have X baseball cards. If Nitish has Y more cards than Gordon, in terms of X and Y, how many cards does Gordon have? We can let the number n equal the number of cards Nitish has and g equal the number of cards that Gordon has. Now let's create two equations. N plus g equals x and n equals g plus y. Substituting g plus y in for n, we have g plus y plus g equals x, or g equals x plus y over 2. Tip number 9, a great aspect of the GRE is that you can move back and forth between questions in a section. In other words, if you are not sure of an answer, you can skip it, mark it for a review, and return to it when you have time. However, you must understand that you are not penalized for wrong answers. So even if you don't know the answer to a particular question and intend to return to the question later, do not leave it blank. If you forget to come back to a question, or if you run out of time before you have a chance to revisit it, there's a 100% chance you're going to get that question wrong. However, if you take a guess, there is a chance that your guess could be correct. So the process that I recommend is 1, guess, 2, mark for review, and 3, come back if you have time. Many students agonize over which answer choice to guess. If you are randomly guessing, pick any answer choice and just move on. There is no answer choice that is more advantageous than any other. So before the exam, decide which oval you will use as your guess oval. Don't waste time during the exam stressing out over which one to choose. Knowing you have no idea, just guess and move on. A caution. Many students stumped on a GC question tend to choose D as their guess. They think that if they don't know the answer, then choosing D, the relationship cannot be determined, is the best choice. Before you resort to choice D, ensure that you have given the question a fair shake. Just because you can't determine the relationship between two quantities does not mean D is the correct answer. Now, if you can eliminate any answer choice, great. Your probability of getting the question correct increases significantly for any answer choice you can fully eliminate. So giving a question a shot before resorting to guessing is always a good idea. So what about the numeric entry questions? The same basic guessing strategy applies even to numeric entry fill-in-the-blank questions. Even though you can't eliminate any answer choice because there are none, you can still make sure to enter an answer into the box. Granted, you have a smaller chance of landing on a lucky guess, but hey, there's no penalty for a wrong answer, so go for it. Here are a few tips for the numeric entry answer question guessing. If you have to guess randomly, enter a reasonable number. Get a feel for what might sound good and guess. If the question is asking how many, a good guess would be a number between, let's say, 5 and 20. If a fraction is asked for, guess a common fraction, such as 1/2 or 3/4. Enter a negative number if you need to determine the smallest root of a tough algebra problem. Remember, guessing is just one component of the GRE time management strategy you want to perfect before test day. Finally, the last tip I'm going to leave you with is don't double check your work. This is very strange when you hear this, but let me explain. Far too often, I've spoken with students after a failed GRE test who have mentioned that they ran out of time. However, their explanation was not that they did not know the material or had test anxiety. It was that they double-checked their work. Remember, you have an average of only 1 minute 45 seconds for each GRE math question. Many questions will take you at least as long, and some will take longer. So you can imagine if you won't have time left to check your work. If you finish a question quickly, you'll want to bank that time to use it on a later problem that's probably going to take you longer than 1 minute 45 to complete. With that being said, that is all that I have for you guys today. Leave a like if you found this video helpful. Put a comment down below with all of your questions. I'll be keeping my eye on the comment section. And most importantly, good luck on your exam.